I want to start out this video by saying I'm glad they resolved to make an actual dragon champion and not just a humanoid half-dragon like they've been doing for all the Vestites. I know the community's been beating a dead horse with the whole why does every new champion look like an anime character, but part of what made League of Legends so appealing to me, and I'm sure many of you as well, is that one game you could play a cool edgy ninja, the next game you could play a gargantuan galaxy-consuming monster, the next you could play a tiny little demon spawn that wants to see the world burn. There's a ton of variety in character expression. Anyways, the first new release scheduled for 2024 is Smolder, a tiny dragon that looks like he came right from Skylanders. Nothing wrong with that, mind you. Narratively, he originates from the same, association as Aurelion Sol. They're not related, but Smolder's got beef with them, or at least I think his mother does, which we'll actually see more of when we go through his abilities, and that's something that piqued my interest about the little guy. So for today's 200 years or well-designed episode, let's talk about Smolder, the fiery fledgling. So, back in the day, champion rivalries were a big thing, evidenced by the similarities and differences between their movesets, whether in name, purpose, or even playstyle. Looking at Nasus and Renekton, they both have a steroid ultimate that grants bonus health along with the damage aura and other effects. Yet their playstyles, true to their personalities, greatly differ from one another. Renekton being the impatient, belligerent, and aggressive one, and Nasus being the composed, patient, and steadfast one. Small details like that, while not of great import for the sake of gameplay, are greatly appreciated by League fans the world over, so it makes me happy to see them doing that now. Smolder is the first AD carry champion we're having in a very long time, with Nilah having been released a year and a half ago. Ever since Callista, Riot has made attempts to expand on the Marksman roster, incorporating new divergent playstyles to give ADC players a wider selection of characters that go beyond the realm of squishy backline machine gun. We had rushdown marksmen like Samira and Kaisa, slow but strong shooters like Jhin, quick and agile hit and runners like Zeri and Callista, or why not, let's give a dude 5 weapons and call it a day. In contrast, Smolder kind of pays homage to the old school ways of being a marksman. When I saw his abilities for the first time, I got more of a Caitlyn Kog'Maw Jinx vibe than I did any of the new marksmen, which made me feel pretty good about him, since old marksmen, no matter their design, were all beholden to the same strengths and weaknesses, meaning there's a very high likelihood that the direction they're taking Smolder would allow him to be more tolerable than the freak shows of seasons 9 through 12. Illustrating his probably one-sided rivalry with Baysol is Dragon Practice. Anytime he lands an ability on an enemy champion or kills a minion or monster with this Q, he gains a stack of Dragon Practice, enhancing his basic abilities. This is pretty much identical to Aesol's Cosmic Creator, getting bonus effects on his abilities equal to the amount of Stardust he accumulates. Infinite scaling has taken a different turn in recent editions, whereas back in the day champions would usually gain free stats like Veigar and Sion, newer champions are taking a more upgrade-based approach. Aesol, for instance, gets more travel distance on Astral Flight, his black hole from Singularity gets bigger, and his falling star shockwave gets bigger too. The issue with old Infinite Scalers is that it wouldn't really solve any of their crippling issues. Nasus could have a billion stacks and still get kited into oblivion. Veigar could have 5000 AP but still get hard engaged on and blown up, which is frustrating for players who did a great job holding down the line in the early game and stacking as best they could, only to be screwed over by the very same weakness that they tirelessly spent the laning phase trying to mitigate. So the new direction Infinite Scalers are taking is not to increase their power, at least not exclusively, but also to enhance their capability. More attack range, more traversability, perhaps crowd control, and whatnot, like how they did with Aesol and to a lesser extent Kindred and Senna. In other words, they made Infinite Scalers follow the same growth process as Evolvers like Kha'Zix, Victor, and Kaisa. More power, yes, but also more tools. Smolder's no different. Super Scorcher Breath is a point-and-click attack on a target enemy that deals physical damage while applying on-hit effects. At 25 stacks of Dragon Practice, the Fireball explodes to damage nearby enemies, improving its wave clear and DPS if he can damage multiple champions. At 125 stacks, the Fireball also splashes behind the initial target, giving Smolder backline access, so even if there's a frontline champion standing in front of him, he can still damage the teammates standing behind them. It's effectively an increase to Smolder's pressure radius. At 225 stacks, all enemies struck by this ability suffer a max held true damage burn over 3 seconds, and if they fall below a certain HP threshold, they get executed, or in other words, Smolder's Q has a discount Elder Dragon buff attached to it. Furthermore, Super Scorcher Breath deals bonus magic damage equal to half his Dragon Practice stacks. Okay, for once, I'm gonna hold off on my knee-jerk response to seeing max out true damage and consider everything in context, even though I will complain about that property later. Seeing as how Smolder's Q will be his main source of DPS alongside his normal attacks, he's packing a serious amount of latent power. We're talking Kog'Maw 1v9 hypercarry levels of power. I like that they made the first threshold 25 stacks, meaning you can pragmatically access the AoE wave clear before you hit level 6 just by last hitting a few waves and throwing the occasional attack at a champion. But the high mana cost given the cooldown might imply Smolder's gonna require Tear of the Goddess or maybe Essence Weaver. The thing with Tear of the Goddess, and subsequently Muramana, is that up until it's completed, it's far less gold efficient than standard AD items. Smolder's gonna have a comparatively weak and exploitable early game, as an Infinite Scaler should. I also think his 125 stacks property is a nice touch because it doesn't invalidate the threat of enemy frontline. Apart from his 225 stacks property, Smolder doesn't have any tank shredding in his kit. That is, unless you count hybrid damage as tank shredding, which some do. At the same time, they don't want his damage to be invalidated either, so by giving him a misfortune type Q where he can damage people behind the initial target makes it so he can still pose a threat to the enemy backline without going down the uncreative path of one-shotting the tank with tons of max health damage. Now for the 225 stacks part. In light of Smolder not having crazy amounts of percent health damage like Vayne, Kai'Sa, Vars and whatnot, and in light of it taking 225 stacks, and in light of him intending to be a super backline 1v9 champ in the same vein as Kog'Maw, max health true damage is more justified on Smolder than on someone like K'Sante. Obviously I'm making this before seeing him on live servers, but my guess is that Smolder doesn't get 225 stacks until around maybe the 25-minute mark depending on how easy of a laning phase he has. But considering how weak he is in the early game, you can probably easily zone him off CS anyway. One more thing to make note of is that his true damage dot is fixed. It has no scaling component whatsoever, 6.5% over 3 seconds, which equates to roughly 2.1 maybe 2.2% per second. That's not as big as it looks. Kog'Maw's Bioarcane Barrage can do more effective magic damage than Smolder can true damage. Even with Navori Quick Blades, you'll only be able to throw out 1 Q per 2 seconds maybe, so it's not the most consequential thing in the game by a long shot. He's not doing hacks levels of true damage with every attack, nor is he doing it from the very start of the game. The execute component is also not as alarming as it looks. Collector executes champs under 5% HP, and Smolder's threshold is 7 to 8%, which isn't that much higher. There's so much damage going around nowadays that most people get one shot in anyway. Essentially, it comes off more as an accessory than anything else. The same way Asol has execute on Singularity, but when was the last time you remembered that being actually the difference maker? Point being, Smolder's true damage is supplementary. You still have to rely on his other attacks, can't just go full tank and rely only on that. At least, I hope not. I don't exactly approve of seeing max out true damage on Smolder nor anyone else, but in his defense, it's more that considering how much damage there is, I'm feeling blasé about it. Would I prefer it be something else? Sure, but at the very least, it's on a squishy low mobility champion and not a high speed rushdown one. The balance of Super Scorcher Breath hinges on the difficulty of acquiring stacks. If Smolder can reach 225 before 20 minutes, then maybe that's an issue, but if on average it takes 25 to 30, I can live with that. By that point everyone does a billion damage anyway. Anyways, let's move on to his W. Oh, excuse me. His W shoots a straight line missile that damages and slows all enemies in its path. Every champion it passes through creates a small explosion, almost like a ravenous Hydro Cleave. It's a very standard neutral poke tool. Given that it creates an explosion with each champion struck, that means if he lands W on all 5 members of the enemy team, he can stack damage on top of each other in a similar fashion to Brand's passive chain explosion. That might be why the numbers look so weak, because on top of his passive adding more damage, if it were any stronger, his W could be busted in team fights. Nothing much else to say about it. It's a neutral poke tool that every marksman is basically expected to have at least one of. Smolder's E gives him a boost of speed for a short period of time and ignores terrain collision, meaning he can fly over walls if near one. For a brief moment of time, he also fires on the nearest enemy, so you can think of this as Urgot's Purge mixed with Asol's Astral Flight. Though unlike Purge, Smolder does not apply on-hit effects with each attack, it's purely just damage. At max crit chance though, it's a lot of hits, 10 to be exact. If you use all of them on a single enemy, that's 350 base plus 100% total AD, and bear in mind he does bonus magic damage equal to a portion of his passive, but that free movement is the important one. Smolder does have mobility, but it isn't as egregious as your modern champions of the ton of dashes. It's more akin to Ezreal's Arcane Shift, Kaelin's 90 Caliber Net, or Corgi's Valkyrie. Good for repositioning, but not really the best in terms of gap closing or putting distance. These are the types of mobility spells that are acceptable. Long cooldown, quick movement options that reward the player when used correctly and punish the player when used carelessly. Honestly, even though Smolder's classification is Marksman, I get the feeling he might be more of a mid laner than a bot laner. He's extremely reminiscent of Corgi, a marksman that plays kind of like a mage. In fact, I don't think playing him bot lane is a good idea considering he has to deal with 2 enemies instead of 1, and he has almost no answer for tower dives, which are extremely common down in bot lane. At least in the mid lane, he can AFK farm and take advantage of a relatively shorter lane to avoid getting ganked. There's also the fact that he has AP ratios on all of his abilities, so there could be a possibility for AP Smolder. But once again, this is all theoretical, numbers and whatnot are subject to change. So having taken a look at his W and E, I'm starting to be more accepting of his max out true damage and execute because the rest of his kit seems kind of underwhelming in all honesty. Not in terms of numbers, but capabilities. Like, if you engage on Smolder, he's His E lets him fly over walls, but it's technically not a dash. Any slow will greatly impede his traversability, and the best thing he can really do in disadvantage is W to try and slow people down. That's about it. They're really forcing him into a protect the ADC playstyle, which I haven't seen in quite a while. Like, your team really has to protect you, because God help you if they don't. This is surprisingly refreshing though, not gonna lie. Every AD carry that came out in the past 5 years has some kind of BS defensive ability, so not having a wind wall or a semi-global dash or some kind of 200 years thing on Smolder is a pleasant surprise. Might just be as a result of me being too jaded on new champions having overloaded abilities, but I mean, look at this, you can fit his W, E, and ultimate all in one screen. I spend more time talking about his Q than his W and E combined because there's really not that much going on with the rest of his stuff. It's like Vex, they're picking a lane with him and sticking to it, not giving him a bunch of extraneous attributes. The key thing that distinguishes him from Corki or Kog'Maw is uptime. The latter two are more burst oriented. Corki activates Gatling Gun, throws at Q and a couple missiles, and tries to kill you before he runs out of ammo. Kog'Maw turns on Bio-Arcane Barrage and tries to snipe you down before he has to wait for W to come back up again. Smolder's Q is consistently low cooldown, and even though his W and E have fairly long downtimes, he's able to continuously rain fire on the enemy team. Smolder doesn't have that same shredding capability as Kog'Maw, but he makes up for it by staying active in the fight for a long time. He's actually extremely teamfight oriented. Q evolves to do AoE damage, W is AoE damage, and his ultimate is also AoE damage. Almost like they're trying to suggest ADC mains are a bunch of whiny babies. Smolder's ultimate has him yell for his mom to airstrike the spot in front of you in sort of a Pantheon ult-like fashion, damaging all enemies and healing Smolder if he's within the line of fire, which he usually is. Reminds me of the old ADC ults, which are usually just a big chunk of damage like Draven, Ezreal, Jinx and stuff. Only instead of a global ult, it's a teamfight ult. Actually no, the range of 4250 may as well be a global ult. So this guy's full potential definitely rests on full-blown 5v5s. If he can layer his Q, W, and ult damage, he can melt entire front and back lines on his own. And he is supposed to do that. Smolder's a fully dedicated, infinite scaling 1v9 hypercarry. I'm frankly impressed. Conceptualizing hypercarries can be challenging on account of there only being so many ways you can design DPS. When I heard he was going to be a backline 1v9 champ, I thought it was just going to be Kog'Maw but with 200 years. Not really though. He's more of a battle mage than a full-on marksman. Considering his excellent AP ratios and the fact that nothing in his kit really incentivizes building attack speed, like I said before, I think there's a possibility for AP Smolder with like Nashers, Liandry's, and Malignants, opting for poke damage and getting big ults down instead of pure DPS. Build diversity can be a double-edged sword though. We've seen how frustrating it can be with other marksmen like Zeri and Kai'Sa, especially Kai'Sa who could build literally anything under the sun. Knowing that Smolder could potentially abuse AP items and AD items has me concerned for his balance. At the same time though, unlike Zeri and Kai'Sa, Smolder's far less mobile and doesn't have a 2000 range poke tool with a 2-second cooldown. That's what I appreciate about him though. No matter how you build him, he's still a squishy backline carry that needs protection. If he gets engaged on by anyone, he has legit zero way to escape. No hard CC, no get off me tool, he can't dash over a massive wall the way Zeri can. That's exactly how a hyper carry should be in my opinion. If they get caught out of position, they should explode. They shouldn't be able to shake off a Leona or Nautilus engage without backup. These days, it almost feels like they can though. I have a feeling balancing Smolder will come down to numbers, which is a good thing. If he does too much damage and is one-shotting everyone or scaling too quickly, then you can just tune him down. There doesn't seem to be anything in his kit that can spiral out of control, necessitating a rework of some kind. Like, this may be the first time, keyword may, that I'm totally fine with the champion having percent held true damage. If a significant amount of their power budget is forfeited to allow that concession, that's acceptable. Cassante's percent held true damage is unfair because cue the showmaker copy pasta. Smolder on the other hand is just pure damage. No shields, no dashes, no untargetability, no AoE 5-second knockup, nothing like that. Really excited to see this guy in action on live servers. I think they did a fantastic job with him in concept. I also heard they made a special quest if he's fighting against Asol where they can take each other's stacks and add it to theirs. Love stuff like that. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on Smolder, if you think he's well or badly designed. Apart from that, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Champion First Impressions videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.